Hello, everybody. This is Bruce Morgan with The Bruce Morgan Show. Today, we are doing a new episode in the Management Best Practices series. The topic I want to talk about today is around knowledge, information, and different definitions we can use to classify the information that we are processing while we're doing our job as a manager. This information could be useful for any employee, but specifically, I'm going to go through these definitions and talk about knowledge and different forms of knowledge and how they might relate to the job of management. Today, our guest cat in the browser is Rainy Basket. Rainy Basket, I don't know, is a cat. I don't know why they're rainy. It's raining outside here in the Pacific Northwest, so it seems appropriate. Okay, so what I want to do is get into definitions and talk about how they relate to information and classifying information. And I'm going to sort of start from sort of the least trustworthy information and go to the more trustworthy or knowledgeable information at the end. We're going to try. But just bear with me here. Okay, so the first definition we're going to look at is for a lie. Now, in the professional workplace, you probably won't encounter a lot of people lying all the time or anything like that. But I wanted to cover it here because I see the term get thrown around in sort of the pop culture sphere or, outside of the workplace quite a bit. And what we want to understand is that lying or a lie is when a human being knows the correct answer. Like, I know 1 plus 1 equals 2, but they say an incorrect answer to someone or they present an untruth, like 1 plus 1 equals 3, and they do this on purpose, okay, in order to deceive the person that they are telling this information to. So if an employee knows that a project is going to take more than 2 weeks, but they tell you that the project's only going to take 2 weeks, this could be considered a lie because they want to deceive you because they're scared of the repercussions of the project being late or something like this. This could be a lie. So what we have to have here with a lie is intent to deceive. That's the important part. I see a lot of people who might take an assumption or an opinion or something else that has no intent to deceive. Somebody just makes a mistake and they classify it as a lie. And I think that is too broad. We need to be very specific here with our terminology, okay? So again, a lie is a false statement made with the intent to deceive. So the person has to know that they're trying to deceive the other person. They have to know the correct answer, say the wrong answer for some sort of nefarious purpose. Okay, so that's where we're starting there. That's a lie. Now, there's an interesting thing between maybe an error or an assumption and a flat out lie. And it's BS. Okay. And this is an expletive, but scientifically, okay, we can use the definition here because it can be very interesting. So the definition down here says talk nonsense to someone typically to be misleading or deceptive. This sounds a lot like a lie. And I would say the real difference here to me is that the person making the claim, like, somebody saying 1 plus 1 equals 3, if it's BS, the person doesn't know if 1 plus 1 equals 3 or 1 plus 1 equals 2 is correct or not. Okay. They're just putting something out there to be deceptive in that they think they know what the answer is and they want to convince other people that they know what the answer is when they don't know what the answer is. That's the difference. When someone is lying, they know the correct answer. They're just not giving you the correct answer. With BSing, the person doesn't actually know the correct answer. They're just crossing their fingers and hoping that they know the correct answer. So this is like a stronger form of speculation. If I say, well, I'm making a guess or I'm speculating, and I tell you that, then I'm not BSing. But if I walk in the room, and this actually happened to me, somebody walked into the room. We had a problem with a system. We didn't know what the problem was. We didn't understand the root cause of the problem in a system. And somebody walked into the room and said, it should be easy to root cause the problem in the system by simply going and getting some information out of a file. And this was not correct. There was no evidence that you could just do this. And my response was, of course, well, what information do you want me to pull from the file? Because we have the file right here. And of course, they sort of said, well, what about this or that? And there were things that we'd already looked at in the file that didn't explain the situation. Or, they were just redefining something we'd already looked at. So they clearly didn't have an idea of what we had to pull from the file to root cause the problem. They were BSing. Okay, they were an important person who got paid more than me, by the way, coming into the room and saying, oh, you can figure this out just by pulling some information out of this file. And that was completely false. It was wrong. It wasn't a lie. They were just BSing, And it turned out we had to go do a bunch of experiments and add things to the system in order to do the detective work to root cause what was happening. And it wasn't as simple as they made it seem. Okay. In that same meeting, I had made a statement about the complexity of the system, being that, we operate this system with procedure A, which is a complex process. Simpler processes like hypothetical process B, people that I'd worked with in the past had investigated and tried to do a process B, but it never worked out. It wasn't accurate enough. And so that's why we had to use the more complicated process A. And this was a historical fact that this had happened. And of course, the person, when I told them that we couldn't simply pull some information right now from this file and root cause the problem, it wasn't as simple as that. They said that my claim that the thing was more complicated was BS, even though it was factually, historically demonstrable that we had tried other options like option B and they just didn't work. Those were facts. So, this is what will happen in the workplace. People will get defensive and start throwing these terms around, lying, BSing, whatever. And it's important to know the details of what these definitions are and how to use them properly, and when they apply and when they don't apply, more importantly. Okay, so that's that. And this is similar, like I said before, let's go to the next tab, to making an assumption. Okay, and if you're upfront about making an assumption, then it can be okay to make an assumption. You might say, my assumption is that team A will get their work done in 2 weeks because typically they can get their work done in 2 weeks. There's no reason to assume that they cannot. Okay. And there would be subcategories of an assumption in the workplace that I would add, which would be like an educated guess. Okay. A subclass. Like you could make an assumption that is predicated on zero information. Like I could just, I could assume that Steve likes chocolate ice cream better than vanilla ice cream without ever seeing Steve say anything about ice cream. It would just be a guess. In the workplace, the more common assumption is going to be what I would call an educated guess. This is where someone is making an assumption or making a prediction, which would be a guess. An assumption might be a statement about something. Like, I think that happened in the past, or I think that's happening. That would be an assumption. An educated guess would be more, or another guess would be, I think this will happen in the future. So a guess is more forward-looking. An assumption is more current or past-looking. But either way, I think a guess is sort of a subset of an assumption. And in the workplace, as a manager, what you're going to want to look for are educated guesses. Now, this is when someone is making an assumption or a guess rather than a statement of fact. And it's important to know that it's not a real statement of fact, But an educated guess is a guess where you have some experience to back up your idea. So, I remember one case where I said, "Look, I can make an educated guess in this meeting and say that the answer to the question you're trying to answer is going to be XYZ because I have a lot of experience on past projects, and my educated guess is that the answer you're going to get is X, Y, and Z and not something else." And of course, the person I was talking to went through and did a bunch of work and paid an employee a ton of money to figure out something that I just told them what the most likely answer was in 5 minutes. So as a manager, you need to be aware of like when someone's making an educated guess, is it a high quality educated guess? Is it a lower quality educated guess? What confidence level does the person have? And a lot of times with managers, they will ask employees for opinions or estimates or these guesses or something, their take, but they won't get into why they have that take. And I think that's the key thing here for this section is as a manager, you want to understand why your employees are making particular educated guesses. Is it because of past projects that are very similar to the current project and it's a very high confidence take? Maybe somebody has an educated guess that's based on past projects, but the new project is very, very different. And the educated guess has low confidence. These are things you will want to try and figure out as a manager with your employees. Okay. And understand, are we making an assumption? Are we making an educated guess? Are we BSing? Do we have a lot of data? Why someone has the answer they do is often more important than the answer itself in terms of the project success, maybe the schedule, the risks associated with the project. And as a manager, you want to be understanding the risks, you want to be understanding the impacts to schedule, and you want to understand how to prioritize things. And knowing how your employees are making educated guesses and why is going to be very important. Okay, moving on. I think I pulled up the definition of opinion. Opinion is a judgment, viewpoint, or statement that is not conclusive, as opposed to facts, which are true statements. So it can be true that somebody has an opinion, but that shouldn't be sort of conflated with the opinion itself. So if I have an opinion that chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream, it's a fact that I have that opinion, but is chocolate ice cream objectively better than vanilla ice cream? It's merely an opinion. So we need to understand when we're working on the job, are people making statements of opinion or are they making statements of facts? Okay, so we're going to move on to the definition of fact. Okay, and this is where things are going to get fuzzy, guys, but bear with me. Okay, so the definition here for the fact is a thing that is known or proven to be true. So to me, the key word here is proved. If somebody is making a claim and they can convince me with sufficient evidence, then, we can conclude that maybe there's a fact. Okay. And this would be different than maybe just sharing an opinion. Okay. So we need to be cognizant. If I say chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream, here's some chocolate ice cream, here's some vanilla ice cream, and you agree with me that you like the chocolate better, we haven't established a fact. We just have a common opinion. Okay. So when we're talking about facts, we need to go back to things like the rules of logic, the rules of evidence, evidentiary standards. If you tell me that you have a $5 bill in your wallet, okay, and I don't know, I'm probably just going to believe you. Okay, now we can go look in your wallet and see if the $5 bill is there. And once we see it, maybe we can say, hey, we've proven this is a fact. Okay. In the meantime, I'm going to make an assumption or an educated guess because having a $5 bill in your wallet is fairly common, at least in the US. Okay. If you say you have a pile of gold bars in your garage, this is a much more complicated claim. I've never met anybody that's got a pile of gold bars in their garage. It seems very strange. I don't know why you would have that. It would be nice. Maybe you could give me a gold bar. But that is going to be a claim that needs a higher standard of evidence. Okay, so when I say we believe claims when there is sufficient evidence, the word sufficient is subjective. Okay, sufficiency for I have $5 in my wallet is different than the sufficiency for I have a huge pile of gold bars in my garage. So we need to be very careful about what evidentiary standards we apply to claims so that we can classify things as facts. Okay. You know, the project did or didn't meet its milestone. Maybe a bunch of managers are arguing about whether a project was successful or not based on different criteria. And we need to go gather evidence to see what we can classify as a fact versus an opinion or an assumption or just some BS. Okay. So this is going to be your job as a manager when you're trying to figure out what's going on with the project. Is the project progressing okay? Are we planning okay? How do we do a better job of planning? We need to know what's a fact. We need to know what's an opinion. We need to know what's an educated guess and the confidence level we have in that educated guess. And then we need to weed out BS and obvious lies, of course. Hopefully nobody in the professional workplace is lying, fingers crossed. But in any case, we have a framework here with these definitions to look at information with a more critical eye and help our employees be successful over the course of a project. Okay, that's the goal. All right. And all of these terms, all of this framework is part of, how do we know something's true? It's part of what philosophers call epistemology, okay, which is the theory of knowledge, especially with regard to methods, validity, and scope. Epistemology is the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from an opinion. Again, I can say, I believe Steve has a pile of gold bars in his garage. Is there enough evidence for the rest of society to have a true justified belief in this claim? Do we have photos of these gold bars? Do we have videotape evidence? Can we go see the gold bars? Oh my gosh, are there receipts? Is there shipping memos? Like, what do we have? Okay. So we need to try and figure out what our threshold will be, because again, this gets into an objective state space. It can get real complicated. I think, key questions, let's see. So we talked about what epistemology is. Key questions in epistemology: what constitutes knowledge? How do we acquire that knowledge? What are sources of knowledge? Can we use testimony, reason, perception, logic, these type of things? What are the limits of our knowledge? Can we ever be truly certain of something? There's this idea that's sort of this idea of solipsism, which is sort of like, well, I'm experiencing the reality of the universe. I'm here, Bruce from Oregon, experiencing the reality of the universe. How do I know any of this is real? How do I know I'm not a brain in a jar like the Matrix or something, and I'm just experiencing something that isn't really real? And how can we figure that out? Well, we just can't. We can just say, well, to the best of my knowledge, I exist and I can observe all these things, and I just have to make a few baseline assumptions that the universe exists, the fundamental laws of logic in terms of identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle are reasonable, and we can do all of the deductive logic after that. We can document standards of evidence after that. We can use that to create forms of law, forms of government, processes in the workplace, and have some confidence that what we're doing will be successful, or that we have models that can give us good predictions. Okay. Related concepts in epistemology would be truth, belief, justification, reason, evidence, and skepticism. And skepticism doesn't mean that you just approach everything in life as if everybody's lying to you or trying to BS you. It just means that you are taking a critical eye when you are saying, what are the standards of evidence that I'm willing to accept for a given claim? If my friend Nick tells me he just got a cat, I'm probably just going to believe him because I know he has cats or has had cats, and maybe his daughter wants a new cat. It's a pretty mundane thing. Okay. If he tells me there's a dragon in his garage, I'm going to be a little skeptical because I don't know what that means. Like, what do you mean a dragon? Like from Lord of the Rings? Like, what has happened? The Hobbit? What is happening here? These things aren't real. So we have to have skepticism to apply the correct bar or barrier of entry for any given claim. And I think that's the key thing we want to do as managers. We want to understand when someone is telling you something about some information, what category does it fall into? And what else can we learn about that information beyond the claim itself? Okay. And this is especially helpful as managers, I don't know, report information up and down the reporting hierarchy. Because a lot of times things can get into the telephone game of information mismanagement, and you can sort of see things going from a direct report who has a very clear understanding of the project and what's happening and has very clear facts. Like we wrote 1,000 lines of code. We have 6 tests and 3 of them don't work. These are things you can go verify with evidence. These are things that you can believe they're justified. And of course, as this information gets passed up and down the management hierarchy and people react to it, the statements may become more statements of assumptions or guesses, or some BS can fly in there, especially because as you go up the management hierarchy, people will want to make declaratives or draw conclusions or, you know, issue commands based on the information that they've seen right away. And it's always better to take a look at the evidence and the information and have a skeptical eye and question it before drawing quick conclusions, making quick declaratives, or telling people what to do. Okay. And that's my advice, is to think about these things. I know epistemology and philosophy can get a little vague, but I think in terms of doing the day-to-day work of managing a project, managing a team, especially in technical work, but in any job function, these concepts and this framework of information and knowledge is very important to have a grasp. Because, like I mentioned before, I was literally in a meeting where somebody came in and was BSing. I don't think they really understood that that's what they were doing consciously. They had no ill intent, okay? And then, of course, in a defensive mechanism, they turn around and use the phrase incorrectly on verifiable evidence in their own conversation. And these are the things we want to avoid, because it can create conflict or, bad working relationships and things like that in the workplace. And so these are my tips to you guys. If you have any questions about this, comments about this, put them in the comment section below. And I will see you next week for another management best practices video. If you've stuck around this long, thanks for your time. I'm Bruce from Oregon. Have a good one, guys.